Have you ever poured every ounce of your soul into someone, only to have them shatter your trust in front of the entire world? You're 6 months pregnant, seated at a glittering high society dinner. Your world stops. Your heart shatters into a million pieces. What would you do then? It's a reflection of real life for so many of us who have been hurt, humiliated, and overlooked, right up until the day we decide to rise and silence the world with our strength. So, let me ask you, if this happened to you, would you collapse, or would you rise? Now, let's begin our story. The mansion sparkled like a jewel against the night sky. Its marble pillars glistened under the floodlights, and the long driveway was lined with cars worth more than most people's homes. Inside, the air was heavy with expensive perfume, forced laughter, and the delicate clinking of crystal glasses. It should have been a night of celebration, a toast to success. But for one woman standing near the edge of the grand dining hall, it was a carefully orchestrated night of humiliation. Emma Carter, 6 months pregnant, clutched her glass of sparkling water, her other hand resting gently over her rounded belly. She wore a soft ivory dress, simple and modest, in stark contrast to the glittering, sequined gowns of the other women. Her face was pale, her eyes weary, but she still carried herself with a grace that only kindness and quiet dignity could grant. The orchestra played a soft, melodic tune in the background, the violins blending with the gentle hum of conversation. At the far end of the room, Damien entered, his presence as commanding as always. Praise for his success, admiration for his charm. But Damien wasn't alone. On his arm was a young woman with fiery red hair cascading over her shoulders, her shimmering scarlet gown hugging every curve of her body. Clara. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Though she had long suspected her husband's betrayal, seeing Clara arrive so brazenly, clinging to Damien like a prize she had just won, was a dagger twisting through her heart. The guests, seasoned professionals in scandal, immediately recognized the sheer audacity of this moment. For the briefest second, their eyes met. There was no shame in his gaze, no hesitation, not even a flicker of guilt. Instead, he smirked, as if daring her to react, as if he was relishing her public humiliation. Damien threw back his head and laughed, a sound loud enough for everyone to hear. Emma's chest tightened. The room began to spin, the voices blending into an indistinct, mocking buzz. She could feel the pity in people's stares, a feeling worse than hate. Damien raised his champagne flute, commanding silence with just a single gesture. The orchestra stopped playing. There was a wave of applause. Then, with deliberate cruelty, he turned toward Clara and pulled her even closer. The crowd leaned in, murmuring with anticipation. Emma's heart pounded in her ears like a war drum. She is the woman who has brought new joy into my life. The word struck Emma like a physical whip. Clara beamed, soaking up the attention like a sponge. She leaned in to kiss Damien on the cheek, then turned her gaze toward Emma, their eyes locking in a silent declaration of war. "Poor thing," Clara whispered, loudly enough for several guests to hear. "Still clinging to a title that doesn't belong to her anymore." Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. "To new beginnings," he declared. Some smiled, eager to stay in his favor. Emma felt her throat close up. Enough. The entire hall fell silent. Her silver hair shimmered in the light, her posture regal despite her age. Clara's smile faltered. "Sit down," she told Damien quietly, though the whole hall heard her. Her tone was not a request. It was an order. Damien frowned, visibly irritated. "Mother, this is my dinner. I will dash." Eleanor raised a hand, silencing him instantly. The power in her gesture was undeniable. Her voice was steady, unshaken. She had never seen Eleanor like this. Then Eleanor said, "Everyone will remain seated. There is something you must all see." She motioned to one of the butlers, who immediately disappeared and returned with a leather folder. Emma's breath caught in her chest. And then, Eleanor stopped right beside Emma. The room held its breath. Her life before Damien had been simple, modest, and in many ways, far happier. She grew up in a quiet town outside of Philadelphia, raised by her widowed mother, who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her dreams were of family dinners, laughter echoing in the kitchen, and someday, children of her own running barefoot across a sunlit yard. Teaching had always been her calling. Even as a teenager, she spent her weekends tutoring younger kids at the local library. After earning her degree in education, she took a position at a small elementary school. Her students absolutely adored her. She was the teacher who remembered everyone's birthdays, who stayed late helping struggling readers, who packed extra snacks for kids who came to school hungry. When Emma first met Damien Carter, she thought she had stumbled into a real-life fairy tale. It happened one rainy afternoon at the public library where Emma often stopped to grade papers. She had been juggling an armful of books when a tall man in a sharp suit stepped forward and caught them just before they tumbled to the ground. His smile was dazzling, his confidence magnetic. Damien was unlike anyone Emma had ever met before. At first, she resisted his charm. Men like Damien didn't usually look twice at women like her, women who wore modest dresses from outlet stores and lived in tiny apartments with mismatched furniture. But Damien was relentless. He sent flowers to her classroom, waited outside the school to walk her home, and made grand declarations about her being the only woman who truly saw him. 6 months later, they were married. The whirlwind romance swept Emma completely off her feet. Suddenly, the woman who used to ride the bus was stepping out of limousines. Not your past, not your background, just you. For a while, she believed him. Their early years of marriage were filled with laughter and late-night walks through Central Park. Then came the pregnancy. When Emma discovered she was expecting, she cried tears of pure joy. For Emma, this child was everything. It was the dream she had carried in her heart since she was a little girl. Damien's reaction was different. At first, he smiled, kissed her cheek, and told her they would manage. But soon, his distance grew into a chasm. He complained about the cost of prenatal vitamins, about the need to renovate the nursery. Once, when she gently asked if he was excited, his response had chilled her to the bone. "I'm building something real. A child is a distraction." From that moment on, a crack formed in the foundation of their marriage. She tried to hide her tears, to keep the peace, to believe that stress was making him cruel. And then came Clara. Emma had noticed subtle changes at first. The scent of expensive perfume on his shirts, lipstick smudges on the rim of glasses he left in his car, whispered phone calls late at night. "Don't embarrass yourself." But the truth revealed itself one afternoon when Emma walked past Damien's study and heard his low voice on the phone, soft and affectionate in a way it hadn't been with her for months. Emma froze. She retreated quietly, clutching her belly, trying not to collapse under the crushing weight of betrayal. That hope shattered the moment Clara walked into the dining hall on his arm. Now, standing in the grand hall, Emma's mind reeled with memories of the life she had given up, the sacrifices she had made, and the love she had poured into a marriage that had become a stage for her humiliation. Her hand tightened over her belly. She whispered silently to her unborn child, "I will protect you, no matter what." Emma had no idea that in just a few moments, her entire fate would be completely rewritten. Perched high on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, its sprawling grounds stretched farther than the eye could see. Inside, the mansion pulsed with the kind of extravagance that both dazzled and suffocated. The dining hall itself was absolutely breathtaking. A long mahogany table stretched nearly the length of the room, set with fine china, crystal goblets, and napkins folded into intricate shapes. Each place was marked with name cards embossed in gold. Centerpieces of white roses and orchids cascaded across the table, their fragrance mixing with the scent of truffle and foie gras being carried in from the kitchen. Poor thing. Pregnant and all alone, and yet she's still standing here. Emma's throat tightened. The quartet quieted, and the conversations dulled. Heads turned toward the grand staircase at the far end of the room. Damien Carter had arrived. His smile spread across the room, practiced and perfect, as though he had rehearsed it in the mirror. Applause rippled through the crowd, polite, eager, almost worshipful. Clara, the mistress, floated down the stairs on his arm like a queen in her own right. Murmurs swelled like a tidal wave. Though she had tried to prepare herself, nothing could have braced her for the sight of her husband parading his mistress in their home, at their dinner table, before all of their peers. Damien reached the floor and raised his hand. The orchestra stilled completely, all eyes locked on him. This house, Damien continued, gesturing grandly at the glittering hall, stands as a symbol of success, of perseverance, of ambition realized. She tilted her head against his shoulder, her smile absolutely radiant. She felt the room sway. The whispers became louder, more pointed. Emma's face burned with shame. She pressed a hand against her belly, whispering silently to her child, "Hold on, please don't let me break." "To new beginnings," he declared. Glasses clinked half-heartedly. Some guests raised theirs with false enthusiasm. Others lowered their eyes, unwilling to openly support such a blatant scandal. The atmosphere was no longer elegant. It was suffocating, poisoned by discomfort and humiliation. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear from this golden cage, but she stood her ground, her legs rooted, her dignity clinging desperately to the last shred of strength she had left. Once, twice firm, unyielding. Eleanor Carter, Damien's mother, rose to her feet. Her silver hair gleamed, her posture rigid, her eyes sharper than any blade. She looked not at Damien, not at Clara, but directly at Emma. Guests leaned forward, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. Eleanor's voice cut through the air, clear and cold. Clara blinked, momentarily uncertain. But behind closed doors, the shine was fading, and what remained was pure arrogance, a hunger for validation, and an ego that demanded constant feeding. Yet those who looked closely would notice something darker: the smug glint in his eyes, the cruel curve of his lips when he glanced at Emma, the way he relished the discomfort rippling through the room. Damien had built his fortune on risk, charm, and absolutely ruthless decisions. But he had also grown addicted to control, to dominance, to the thrill of breaking the rules and still winning. To him, loyalty was a weakness, love was conditional, and respect was just a currency. She had been a model, though her career never rose beyond magazine covers and promotional campaigns. What she lacked in professional accomplishment, she more than made up for in beauty and in her relentless hunger for status. That night, Clara had leaned in close, laughed at all of his jokes, and whispered just enough admiration to make him feel completely invincible. Damien, craving novelty, had fallen quickly and hard. She saw in him the life she believed she deserved: the mansion, the wealth, the glittering stage where others would envy her. With Damien, she could step into a role that Emma could never play, the role of a glamorous queen in the world of the elite. But Clara wasn't content with just being the other woman. She wanted more. She wanted Emma erased from the picture entirely. But beneath the sweetness was a core of pure steel. Every word she chose was designed to sting. "Pregnancy does take a toll, doesn't it?" Clara cooed to one guest, her eyes sliding deliberately toward Emma's pale face. The guest chuckled nervously, darting a glance at Emma before quickly looking away. Clara thrived on that discomfort, on the way others joined in her cruelty just to avoid being her next target. He placed a hand on the small of her back, pulling her closer, proud to display her as though she were a prized possession. To him, Emma was no longer a partner, no longer the woman he once promised forever to. In fact, he seemed almost resentful of it, as though the pregnancy was an inconvenience, a distraction from his glittering life. "Emma!" Damien's voice rang out suddenly across the table, his smile wide, his tone cutting. "Don't you think Clara looks stunning tonight?" The room shifted as heads turned. Emma's cheeks burned as every eye fell upon her. Clara's laugh was sharp and triumphant. It's kind of her to admit it. Not every woman can be so gracious when times are changing. The implication hung heavy in the air. Damien raised his glass again, thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. Some guests raised their glasses half-heartedly. A few whispered to each other, already plotting how to use this scandal for gossip. But there was one person in the room who saw more than just humiliation. She had long known her son's flaws, but never had she seen him stoop so low. And never before had another woman, the mistress, no less, looked her directly in the eye with such blatant arrogance. More than once that evening, Clara's words slipped into outright disrespect. The hall went silent at that. Damien chuckled nervously, trying to brush it off, but Eleanor's face remained completely unreadable. Clara, mistaking silence for weakness, pressed even further. I mean, with all due respect, the future belongs to women like me. Bold, modern, fearless. Emma's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. The sting of Clara's words pierced deeper than the stares. But it wasn't just Emma who reacted. It wasn't detachment, not cold distance, but pure, unadulterated anger. Clara laughed lightly, raising her glass. To new eras, then. Damien clinked glasses with her, grinning. It was calculation. And as her eyes lingered on Emma's trembling hands resting over her belly, Eleanor knew exactly what she had to do. The storm was coming, and Damien and Clara had no idea they were about to be swept away. Waiters carried silver trays laden with courses that looked more like art than food, tiny arrangements of foie gras, truffle-infused soup, and roasted pheasant carved at the table. Guests pretended to focus on their meals, but the real entertainment was unfolding in plain sight. Damien leaned back in his chair, his arm draped casually over Clara's shoulders. You know, Clara has the most exquisite taste, he announced, lifting his wine glass. A ripple of chuckles floated across the table. Emma's stomach twisted into knots. Clara laughed lightly, pressing a manicured hand against Damien's chest. Oh, don't be unkind. She tries. Emma's hands tightened in her lap. She wanted to vanish beneath the tablecloth, to run from the room, but her body remained rigid. To Clara's impeccable taste, and to all the ways she has improved my life. The words cut deeper than any blade. Between courses, she turned her charm on the guests, laughing and whispering, ensuring that everyone saw her as Damien's rightful partner. Her every gesture was perfectly calculated. At one point, she deliberately leaned over Emma to reach for a dish, her perfume overwhelming, her smile smug. It's just that space is rather tight at this table. Some of us take up more room than others. The implication was cruel and undeniable. The guests exchanged glances, some smirking, some looking deeply uncomfortable. Damien chuckled. Clara, you mustn't tease. Emma is sensitive these days. Perhaps, Clara continued sweetly, when the baby comes, Emma will finally have something of her own to keep her busy. Then she won't need to attend these dinners. It must be so exhausting for her, being surrounded by people so different. To new beginnings, he repeated, this time staring directly at Emma. The chandeliers above were pressing down like a physical judgment. Her chest tightened, and her vision blurred. Careful, darling, Damien drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. Clara giggled, leaning into him. Don't be cruel, she said, though her eyes danced with satisfaction. Emma pushed back her chair, the screech against the marble silencing the entire room. If you'll excuse me, she whispered, her voice cracking. She turned to leave, desperate for air, desperate to escape the stares, the whispers, the suffocating humiliation. But before she could take a single step, Damien's voice rang out. Sit down, Emma. The command froze her in place. His tone was sharp, final, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. Her dignity felt crushed beneath his heel. Damien smiled, satisfied, as though he had just won some invisible battle. Clara rested her head against his shoulder, triumphant. And Emma, broken, lowered her gaze to her plate, her tears finally spilling silently onto the porcelain. She whispered to herself so quietly that no one could hear, "Hold on, my child. Just hold on." The orchestra resumed, but the music was hollow. She did not look at Damien. She did not look at Clara. Instead, her gaze settled firmly on Emma and the woman who sat silently humiliated, her hands still trembling over the child she carried. Eleanor rose slowly to her feet, the sound of her cane against the marble drawing every eye once again. The hall fell silent. Her cheeks still burned from the tears she had tried so hard to hide. Damien broke the silence with a laugh, sharp and mocking. "Mother, please. You don't need to indulge this farce. Emma is. Well, she's fragile. Perhaps she's had enough for the evening. Yes, poor thing. Maybe she should go rest. These dinners can be so overwhelming." She felt powerless, like a child who had been scolded in public, too broken to even defend herself. She remembered her students at the school, those little eyes that once looked up to her with such admiration. Was this dignity? Sitting silently while her husband paraded another woman before her. But most of all, she thought of her unborn child. The tiny heartbeat that had filled her with such joy during doctor visits. What kind of life was she bringing this child into? She wanted to scream, to cry out to Damien, "Look at me. I am your wife. I am carrying your child." Emma pushed back her chair again, rising unsteadily to her feet. She needed air. She needed to escape before the walls of the mansion crushed what little strength she had left. The orchestra faltered, their bows hesitating on the strings as the guests murmured. "Emma!" Damien's voice rang out behind her, sharp and commanding. "Where do you think you're going?" She froze, every eye locked on her once again. Her body trembled, but she did not turn back. Clara giggled, her voice like nails scraping on glass. Emma stumbled forward, her tears blinding her until she reached the massive double doors. She pushed them open, stepping into the long, quiet hallway beyond. The silence of the corridor wrapped around her, but it wasn't comforting. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the cold marble floor, her arms wrapped tightly around her belly. The sobs came then raw, uncontrollable, tearing through her chest. "I can't do this. I can't raise this child in a house of cruelty. I can't fight them. I'm not strong enough." The thought terrified her. For the first time, Emma doubted herself as a mother. Her tears soaked into the silk of her dress. She placed both hands over her belly, feeling the tiny life inside her respond, as if reminding her of its presence. Her tears flowed anew, but this time they came from something deeper than grief. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I promise I'll do better. I'll find a way to keep you safe." For the first time that night, her despair cracked open to reveal something else, resolve. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. Behind her, the muffled sound of laughter drifted from the dining hall, Damien's voice booming above the rest. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "Strength isn't about never breaking, Emma. It's about standing up again after you've been broken." At that moment, the doors creaked open behind her. She expected Damien, or worse, Clara, coming to gloat over her collapse. But it was neither. Eleanor Carter's eyes, which had been so cold and sharp in the dining hall, now softened as they fell on Emma. She simply looked at the young woman crumpled against the wall, one hand over her belly, her face streaked with tears. Emma stared at the outstretched hand, her heart pounding, knowing that her life was about to change forever. Emma hesitated, staring at Eleanor's outstretched hand. For so long, she had thought of her mother-in-law as cold, distant, a woman who tolerated her presence but never truly embraced her. Her sharp eyes, usually unreadable, now carried something unexpected, conviction. "Come," Eleanor said again, her voice low but filled with authority. "It's time." Confused but too weary to resist, Emma followed her back toward the dining hall. When they entered, the laughter died instantly. Every guest turned, their eyes widening at the sight of Eleanor leading Emma forward like a queen presenting her rightful heir. Clara stiffened, and the air crackled with tension. Eleanor walked to the head of the table, her cane striking the floor with a measured rhythm. She stopped beside Emma, then motioned for the butler. The leather folder was placed back into her hands. Damien's voice cut through the silence. "Mother, what are you doing?" Eleanor ignored him completely. She looked at Emma. "Take them." Eleanor's voice was steady. "The future." Damien stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. For the first time all night, Damien faltered. His jaw tightened, but the sheer weight of her authority pressed him back into his chair. Eleanor lifted the top document from the stack. Gasps erupted. Damien's face drained of all color. "You can't be serious. Those belong to me." "Silence," Eleanor snapped, her eyes cutting like ice. Clara froze, stunned into submission. "Because you have what my son has lost," Eleanor said firmly. "Honor, dignity, and compassion. And because the blood of this family, my grandchild, grows within you. That child will inherit a future built on strength, not on scandal." Eleanor's gaze turned to him, hard and unyielding. "And you are a disgrace." The words silenced him completely. Damien's face burned crimson. "You can't take this from me. I built this empire." "No," Eleanor said coldly. "You inherited it, and now you've squandered the right to keep it." Clara leaped to her feet, her composure completely shattering. "This is ridiculous. You can't just hand everything to her. She's weak, pathetic, clinging to a ring that means nothing." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You dare speak of rings when you were none and claim another woman's husband? You dare mock the mother of this family's heir?" The hall gasped. Clara's cheeks burned red, but she pressed on. "She's nothing. Look at her, crying in the hallway, breaking under pressure. Do you really believe she can run this empire?" Eleanor leaned forward, her voice a low growl. Emma's eyes widened, tears glistening. But this time, they were not from despair. They were from shock, from the overwhelming weight of the moment pressing down upon her. Damien's fists clenched at his sides, his voice shaking with fury. Eleanor's expression hardened. "I choose what is right. Blood is not enough to excuse disgrace." But Damien could find no words. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor placed the papers directly into Emma's trembling hands. Emma's chest heaved, her tears spilling silently as she stared down at the documents. Whispers began to swell again, spreading like wildfire. She stood abruptly, her voice shrill. "This isn't over. You think you can just erase me, but Damien and I dash." And in that silence, every guest realized the undeniable truth. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, and Emma was no longer the humiliated wife. The leather folder trembled in Emma's hands, the weight of it heavier than solid gold. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The words of Eleanor still echoed in her ears, "From this night forward, you hold the Carter legacy." For months, she had felt like a shadow in her own home, ignored, betrayed, and humiliated. And yet, in a single, earth-shattering moment, the very ground beneath her had shifted. She wasn't just the woman Clara had mocked. Clara's voice snapped her back to the present. "This is absurd," she cried, her voice shrill and desperate. "You can't seriously hand everything to her. She's weak. Look at her, she's shaking. She's not fit for this." Damien snarled, his face contorted with rage. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She drew a slow, deliberate breath and lifted her head. "You're right, Clara. I was shaking. I was afraid. I thought I didn't belong here. She paused, her hand pressing gently over her belly. Every guest leaned in. They recognized the courage in Emma's words, a courage they themselves might have buried under society's demands. Damien's fists clenched. Enough of this sanctimonious nonsense. You're nothing without me. Clara's face twisted with fury. I'm still here, and I'm the one holding everything you thought was yours. You can't do this. You don't have the strength. You don't have the power. You don't even belong in this world. The word struck Clara like a physical slap. Emma held his gaze, her own voice unwavering. The room buzzed with shock. Clara's voice cracked with desperation. She can't win. Damien, do something. But Damien could only stand there, fists trembling, as the room around him shifted. Some looked at Emma with respect, others with awe. Clara reached for his arm, but for the first time, Damien didn't move to reassure her. For the first time all night, Emma felt the crushing weight of humiliation lift from her shoulders. She wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. Each step echoed with a newfound strength. When she reached the center of the hall, she turned back, her eyes locking on the guests who had once pitied her. Her voice rang out clear, echoing across the marble and crystal. It started with a few, hesitant at first, then spread like fire until the very walls vibrated with the sound. Emma's eyes widened. Tomorrow. The applause still echoed in the hall when Eleanor raised her cane, silencing the crowd once again. Her sharp and commanding eyes swept across the table. Tomorrow, she said firmly, the Carter estate and all its holdings will be legally transferred under Emma's authority. Tonight, however, there is some unfinished business. They had come for dinner, but what they were witnessing was far more thrilling, the unraveling of power, the collapse of arrogance, and the rise of a woman they had once pitied. Clara scoffed, stepping forward, her red dress shimmering under the chandelier. Her voice, soft yet piercing, cut through the hall. Did Damien build it, Clara? Or did generations before him sacrifice, sweat, and bleed for this family's name? Damien inherited wealth, but wealth without character is a house built on sand. And tonight, that house collapses. The guests erupted in murmurs. Damien's face turned a deep red, his fists clenched at his sides. He stepped forward, carrying another folder, this one slimmer but just as dangerous. These, Eleanor declared, her voice ringing out, are the records Damien thought he had hidden. The debts, the reckless deals, the gambling of our assets to impress his mistress and his own ego. I have tolerated his mistakes long enough, but I will not watch him drag this family's name into ruin. Gasps tore through the room. Several guests covered their mouths in shock. Damien's eyes widened in horror. You went through my records, he spat. Emma stepped forward then, her chin high, her voice clear as a bell. This is what you didn't want them to see, Damien. The truth. You built your empire on arrogance, not wisdom. And you thought no one would ever hold you accountable. But tonight, accountability has come. And you, Clara, you mocked me, called me weak, and laughed while I cried. But tell me, what power do you hold now without him? You're nothing more than a shadow, clinging to someone else's name. When his world crumbles, so will yours. Clara's face contorted with fury. You think you've won? You think any of these people respect you? They're clapping because they enjoy the spectacle, not because they believe in you. Perhaps. But respect is earned, Clara. And tonight, I've earned theirs. What have you earned but their contempt? Damien, desperate, slammed his hands on the table. Emma stepped closer, her eyes locked on his, her voice dropping to a steady, chilling calm. No, Damien. You already gave it away. The moment you chose betrayal over loyalty, greed over honor, and arrogance over love, you lost it all. I'm not taking it from you. You threw it away. Enough, she commanded. This dinner has witnessed enough disgrace. Tonight will be remembered not for your cruelty, Damien, but for Emma's strength. She is the future of this family. And if any of you doubt it, look into her eyes. Tell me you do not see the strength of a woman who has endured humiliation and has risen stronger for it. The hall grew quiet. A man at the far end of the table, an old business partner of the Carters, rose to his feet. Another followed, then another. She no longer felt like the broken woman in the hallway. She felt like a leader, like a mother who would protect her child with every breath in her body. Do something. Stop them. Don't let her steal everything. But Damien's shoulders slumped. The fury drained from his face, replaced by something Emma had never seen in him before, fear. Emma turned away from him, her voice carrying over the applause. The hall roared with approval, glasses lifted high, the orchestra striking triumphant chords. Clara buried her face in her hands, unable to bear the weight of her own disgrace. Yet, as the applause reached its peak, Eleanor leaned close once more, her voice quiet but firm. You've won tonight, child, but victory comes with responsibility. Tomorrow, the world will know, and you must be ready. Emma's breath caught. Tomorrow, the world. The applause faded slowly, like thunder rolling away after a storm. For the first time that night, she didn't feel like an outsider in her own home. She felt like the rightful heart of it. But Eleanor's words lingered in her mind, tomorrow, the world will know. She sat by her window, looking out at the sprawling estate, the stars glimmering above like scattered diamonds. Tomorrow, this private storm would become public. Fear tried to creep in, whispering doubts. Could she endure the scrutiny of a world that was eager to feast on scandal? By morning, the mansion was buzzing. Invitations had been sent out overnight, the Carter matriarch had summoned business leaders, investors, and the press. The world would hear the truth, not as a rumor, but from Emma herself. She looked at herself in the mirror and for the first time, she thought, this is who I was meant to be. When she stepped into the grand hall again, the energy was electric. Cameras clicked, voices murmured, and all eyes turned to her. Eleanor stood at her side, her cane tapping rhythmically as she led Emma to the podium that had been set up at the center. Damien and Clara were nowhere to be seen. They had been escorted to another wing of the house, their protests falling on deaf ears. For a moment, the silence pressed down on her, the weight of expectation almost unbearable. But then she remembered the night before, the laughter, the humiliation, the tears in the hallway, and she remembered how she had risen. For too long, I stood in the shadows, unseen and unheard. Many of you know me only as Damien Carter's wife, the quiet woman beside him at galas and dinners. But last night, you saw what happens when arrogance and betrayal are allowed to flourish. You saw a man throw away his honor and a woman mocked for her dignity. And you saw me rise. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room, but this time, it was admiration, not scandal. Emma's eyes swept across the faces before her. We live in a world where women are too often silenced, humiliated, and told to accept betrayal as if it were their own fault. Last night, I was humiliated. I was mocked. But I am still here. And I will not only endure, I will lead. Emma raised her hand, quieting the room. This isn't just my story. It is the story of every woman who has been told she is not enough. Every woman who has been betrayed, abandoned, or silenced. To you, I say this, you are stronger than you know. You carry within you a dignity that no one can ever steal, not even those who laugh at your pain. Rise, stand tall, and protect what is yours, because when you do, no one can ever take it away from you. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Clara's cheeks were streaked with tears, her once smug smile completely gone. Emma turned away from them, no longer needing to prove herself. Their power over her was gone forever. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice carrying across the room. Tears glistened in Emma's eyes as she whispered, thank you. A few months later, the doors of the Carter mansion opened once more, but this time, not for a tense dinner party, but for a celebration of new life. The grand hall, once a stage for humiliation, was now filled with soft sunlight, white flowers, and the gentle sound of a harp. He was perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's determined eyes. Eleanor stood beside her, no longer just a matriarch, but a doting great-grandmother, a genuine smile gracing her lips. Clara had disappeared completely, her 15 minutes of infamy long over. It was here, in her arms. It was in the strength she had found in her darkest hour, and the hope she had built from the ashes of betrayal. So, the story has come to an end. And my dear friends, you're still here, aren't you? Maybe you saw yourself in Emma's pain. Maybe you felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of silence, or the fear of standing all alone. But you also witnessed her incredible rise. Life, my friends, is not about avoiding the storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Emma could have crumbled. But instead, she chose to rise, to claim her own worth, to protect her child, and to show the world that dignity is a power that no one can ever take from you. And maybe, just maybe, this is what life is asking of you, too. To take the pain you've carried, the betrayal you've endured, and let it forge a new kind of strength deep inside you. Your struggles can be the same for you. So tonight, as we close this chapter, I want you to carry one truth with you: you are stronger than you think. You are worth more than the pain you've suffered. And like Emma, you can rise. And maybe, my friend, this is your time to rise.